I sat in the front pew at my wife's funeral, staring at her casket, when the church doors slammed open. My daughter-in-law walked in, wearing a sparkling blue dress, leaned toward my son, and whispered, "Finally, everything she owned is ours." He only lowered his head and nodded. That afternoon, after I buried my wife, I came home to a moving truck in my driveway. Then I heard her say, "Master bedroom first. The old man can take the guest room." They thought grief had broken me. They were wrong. This story starts at a funeral. Before we continue, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever discovered something after someone passed that completely changed how you saw them, yes or no? Your perspective matters. Quick note, some details are fictionalized for storytelling. The message, what love and justice look like when they meet, is what I hope stays with you. I sat in the front pew of First Presbyterian Church in Buckhead, staring at my wife's mahogany casket, while 200 people whispered behind me about the one person who should have been at my side and wasn't. I am Lawrence Hewitt, 68 years old, and for 42 years I calculated the weight bridges could bear, but I never calculated the weight of betrayal at my own wife's funeral. Florence Hewitt, 67, lay in the mahogany casket, the woman who had taught third graders for 3 decades, and who I would soon discover had spent her final 3 years teaching me one last lesson about justice. White lilies draped the polished wood. Her hands were folded over the Bible she'd read every Sunday morning at this exact church for 40 years. Reverend Lewis, who had baptized my son Brent 42 years ago in this same sanctuary, looked at me from the pulpit with eyes that understood grief, but not yet the deeper betrayal unfolding in his front pew. I checked my watch for the third time. 10:15 a.m. The service should have started at 10 o'clock sharp. These people had known us for 40 years. They knew respect. They knew punctuality. But the seat next to me, the seat reserved for my son, remained empty. The whispers grew louder. "Where is he? Poor Lawrence. On today of all days." Mrs. Patterson, one of Florence's teacher friends, dabbed her eyes with a tissue and shook her head. The deaconess, Mrs. Higgins, kept glancing at the heavy oak doors, then at me, then at Reverend Lewis, silently asking what we should do. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on Florence's casket, on the spray of white lilies on the program that listed hymns she'd chosen 6 months ago when the cancer diagnosis came back terminal. My hands gripped the edge of the wooden pew. Then at 10:17 a.m. the heavy oak doors banged open. The sound cracked through the sanctuary like a gunshot. 200 heads turned in unison. The whispers died instantly. Roxanne Hewitt, 37, entered the church in a diamond-studded midnight blue evening gown 20 minutes late, her heels clicking on stone like a runway entrance at the wrong venue. Not black, not gray, not even navy. Midnight blue, the color of champagne toasts and New Year's Eve celebrations. The dress had a plunging neckline. Diamond earrings caught the light from the stained glass windows. A Hermès Birkin bag dangled from her wrist. The scent of Chanel No. 5 rolled down the center aisle like a wave overwhelming the lilies. My son Brent, 42, walked down that church aisle looking like a man being led to the gallows, his engineering degree as worthless as his spine. His tie was crooked, his eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't look at the casket. He didn't look at me. He just followed his wife's clicking heels. Somewhere behind me, Mrs. Higgins whispered, "Lord have mercy." I didn't turn around immediately. I waited. I heard every click of those heels on the stone floor, 23 steps from the back doors to the front pew. I heard the rustle of Roxanne's gown, the clink of her diamond bracelet. What kind of woman wears diamonds to a funeral and treats the center aisle of a church like a catwalk? Roxanne slid into the pew beside me. Brent followed. She didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge the 200 pairs of eyes boring into her back. didn't glance at the casket holding the woman who had welcomed her into our family 10 years ago. She simply adjusted her dress, crossed her legs, and pulled out her phone to silence it, a task she apparently couldn't have completed in the parking lot 20 minutes earlier. Reverend Lewis cleared his throat. The organist began the opening hymn. The service proceeded. I didn't hear most of it. I sat 8 inches from my son, close enough to smell the coffee on his breath, close enough to see his hands trembling slightly in his lap, but he felt 1,000 miles away. When had I lost him? Was it gradual, or had there been a single moment, a structural failure I'd missed? The service moved through eulogies. Florence's teaching colleague spoke about her dedication. The principal read letters from former third graders. Reverend Lewis spoke about faith and eternal rest. I heard it all as if through water, distant, muffled, irrelevant. Then came the moment of silent prayer before the final hymn. Reverend Lewis bowed his head. Let us take a moment of silence to reflect on Florence's legacy and offer our private prayers. The sanctuary fell into absolute stillness. 200 people, heads bowed, hands folded. The kind of quiet that only happens in churches and the second before a bridge cable snaps. Roxanne leaned into Brent's ear. I sat 8 inches away. I am an engineer. I understand acoustics resonance, the way sound travels through enclosed spaces. I heard every syllable. Finally, she whispered. It's our turn. Brent didn't pull away, didn't flinch, didn't look at his mother's casket lying 3 feet in front of him. He just nodded. One small nod. Agreement. Complicity. Greed. The splinter drove deep into my palm, sharp, grounding pain, the only thing keeping me from standing up and throwing her out of the house of God. My hand had gripped the wooden pew so hard that a piece of the old wood had broken off and pierced skin. I felt blood trickle down my palm, warm and wet. I didn't wipe it away. I needed the pain. I needed the anger. It was fuel. In that moment, I didn't lose a son. I finally saw him clearly for the first time. I had designed buildings that stood through hurricanes, but nothing in 40 years had prepared me for the structural failure I was witnessing inside my own family. They thought I was a grieving widower too broken to notice their greed. They had no idea I had just made the most important calculation of my engineering career, the precise load-bearing capacity of revenge. The casket descended into Georgia red clay, while I stood at the head of the grave holding sunflowers, Florence's favorite, and listening to my son and his wife plan the demolition of everything she had built. 2 hours had passed since the church service. The September sun beat down on Oakland Cemetery like judgment. Sweat rolled down my collar. The funeral director lowered the mahogany casket with mechanical precision, inch by inch, into the earth. I should have been thinking about 42 years of marriage, about morning coffee on the porch, about the way Florence laughed at my terrible jokes. Instead, I was doing calculations, acoustic calculations, sound travel calculations. The kind of math that told me Roxanne's whisper 10 feet to my left was perfectly audible if you knew how to listen. We'll have Daniel, the lawyer, draw up POA paperwork tonight, Roxanne murmured to Brent, her voice just loud enough to carry over the Reverend's prayer. Power of attorney. They weren't even waiting for the reception. Brent shifted his weight hands in his pockets. What about the investment portfolio? Can we access that immediately? Once the POA is filed, we control everything. The house, the accounts, the patents, all of it. Roxanne adjusted her black dress. She'd changed from the blue monstrosity, at least. We'll start with the master bedroom renovation. Marble countertops, walk-in closet. Then we list the property by spring. List the property. The house Florence and I had bought in 1985. The house where we'd raised Brent. The house where Florence had spent her last 3 months in hospice care, looking out the bay window at her rose garden. I kept my eyes on the casket. My hands gripped the sunflowers so hard the stems bent. Stanley Lockwood, 67, stood 30 feet from the grave in a charcoal suit, my Georgia Tech roommate from 1978, and though Roxanne didn't know it, Florence's attorney for the past 7 years. Our eyes met across the crowd of mourners. He gave one subtle shake of his head. A signal. They don't know. Roxanne thought Stanley was their family lawyer. Florence had let her think that. Had encouraged it, even mentioning Stanley's name at Sunday dinners, asking him for advice on estate planning, while Roxanne listened with hungry eyes. But Stanley's loyalty had never wavered. Every document, every clause, every protection Florence had built into her will, Stanley had witnessed it all. I had one ally. One person who knew what was coming. The Reverend finished his prayer. The funeral director stepped back. People began filing past the grave, dropping roses onto the casket. Florence's teaching colleagues wept. Former students, now adults, stood silent and red-eyed. Mrs. Higgins from the church dabbed her face with the same tissue she'd used during the service. Roxanne checked her phone. How long does it take for grief to turn into greed? In Roxanne's case, the transformation happened before the dirt hit the casket. I placed my sunflowers on top of the mahogany lid. Florence had loved sunflowers since our first date in 1979, when I'd bought her a bouquet from a street vendor because I couldn't afford roses. She'd kept one pressed in her Bible for 40 years. That same Bible was in the casket, now tucked under her folded hands. "I'll fix this," I whispered to the casket. "I promise." Brent stood beside Roxanne, staring at his shoes. He hadn't cried once. Hadn't looked at the casket during the lowering. Hadn't placed flowers. His mother lay 6 feet underground, and he was mentally measuring the master bedroom for marble countertops. I turned and walked toward my car. Stanley fell into step beside me, silent, respectful. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. 45 years of friendship meant I could read his expression. Stay calm. Trust the plan. Florence knew what she was doing. I drove home alone, hands steady on the wheel, radio off. I needed silence. I needed to walk through the front door of the house Florence and I had shared for 38 years and feel her presence in the empty rooms. I needed to smell her lavender soap in the bathroom, see her reading glasses on the nightstand, touch the coffee mug she'd used every morning, the one that said, "World's Best Teacher," that a student had given her in 1995. I needed one moment of peace before the war began. Instead, I turned onto Rosewood Lane at 3:15 p.m. and found a massive orange 26-foot U-Haul truck blocking my driveway. The rear tires had crushed the entire rose bed. 20 bushes, pink heritage roses, Florence's pride flattened into red Georgia clay. Petals scattered like confetti. Broken stems jutted from the dirt like bones. The truck's weight had compressed 42 years of careful cultivation into a tire-shaped grave. Florence had planted those roses the summer of 1981, the year Brent was born. 20 pink bushes for 20 hours of labor, she'd joked. Every spring they bloomed. Every summer she pruned them. Every fall she mulched the roots for winter. Brent had played beside them as a toddler. Had picked them for Mother's Day bouquets, had posed for prom photos in front of them. Now he was using a moving truck to erase them. Roxanne stood on the front porch in jeans and a work shirt directing 2 men in gray coveralls. She'd changed again. The funeral dress was gone. This was business attire. "Stack the boxes in the master bedroom," she called out. "That's ours now. The old man can take the guest room." The old man. I was standing 20 feet away. She saw me. She didn't care. I walked past the crushed roses, past the moving crew, hauling boxes of their belongings, up my front steps, past Roxanne, giving orders like she owned the place. The front door stood wide open. Inside, I could see Brent in the foyer, pulling family photos off the walls. Florence's teaching award. Our wedding portrait. The photo of Brent's college graduation, Florence in the front row, beaming with pride. Brent was stacking them face down on the floor. Not even 4 hours since we lowered the casket. They had come prepared. I stood in my own driveway, watching the orange truck idle in the ruins of everything Florence had tended for 4 decades. The movers didn't know what they were crushing. Brent did. He had played beside those bushes as a toddler posed in front of them for prom photos, picked blooms for Mother's Day cards. Now he stood in my foyer, pulling down picture frames, while his wife directed strangers through my front door. They hadn't waited for the grief to settle. They had come prepared, and I had opened the gate myself by assuming blood was thicker than greed. The sound of ripping plastic woke me at 6 the next morning. Industrial trash bags being torn open in the master bedroom where Florence and I had slept for 40 years. I lay in the guest room bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to Roxanne's footsteps overhead. Heavy, purposeful. The sound of someone claiming territory. The guest room was smaller, darker, with a window that faced the neighbor's fence instead of the garden. Florence had used this room for sewing. Her reading chair still sat in the corner, a stack of third-grade vocabulary workbooks on the side table. She'd been grading papers the week before she died. Above me, something heavy hit the floor. Then another. Then the screech of hangers being yanked across a closet rod. I got up, pulled on yesterday's clothes, and walked upstairs. Roxanne stood in the master bedroom doorway, blocking my view inside. She wore yoga pants and a tank top, hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking like she was preparing for a workout instead of dismantling a dead woman's life. "Morning," she said, not moving. "We're just doing a little organizing, making space." I stepped around her. Florence's closet was half empty. Black industrial trash bags, the kind you use for yard waste, not clothes, sat bloated on the floor. Through the translucent plastic, I could see flashes of color: Florence's blue cardigan, the yellow sundress she wore to church picnics, the red wool coat I'd bought her for our 30th anniversary. Roxanne hadn't folded anything, just stuffed them in like garbage. "Nobody wears this stuff anymore," Roxanne said behind me. "We need the closet space. I have 3 seasons of wardrobe to unpack." On the dresser, Florence's ceramic collection, 30 years of hand-painted pieces from our anniversary trips, sat jumbled in cardboard boxes marked "Junk" in black Sharpie. The blue heron from Savannah, the lighthouse from Cape Cod, the magnolia from New Orleans. Each one a memory, a weekend, a moment, when Florence had seen something beautiful and wanted to take it home. Now they were junk. I didn't say anything. I stood in the doorway and watched. Brent appeared in the hallway carrying an armload of frames, family photos. Florence's Georgia Educator of the Year Award from 2018. Our wedding portrait from 1981. The photo of Brent's college graduation, where Florence stood in the front row beaming. "Then maybe we should put these in a box instead of..." Brent started. A box to put where Roxanne cut him off. "In the garage so rats can nest in them. We're moving forward, not looking back." Brent's mouth opened, then closed. He walked past me without making eye contact, heading toward the garage. I followed him downstairs. Watched him stack the frames face down on the concrete floor between paint cans and garden tools. Florence's face pressed against dirty concrete. The award she'd cried over when they'd called her name at the ceremony, tossed next to a rusty lawnmower. Every item they threw away was another piece of evidence I added to my mental list. I had spent 40 years calculating load-bearing capacity. This was no different, just a different kind of weight. Item 1, blue cardigan, purchased 2015, worn every Sunday to church. Item 2, ceramic heron Savannah, 2008. Item 3 Educator Award, May 2018, presented by Georgia Department of Education. I was building a case. They were building their own prosecution. That night, I ate dinner alone in the kitchen, while Roxanne and Brent unpacked boxes in what used to be my bedroom. I could hear her laughing on the phone, describing the upgrades she had planned. Marble countertops, new lighting, a complete renovation that would erase every trace of the woman who had lived here for 40 years. I washed my plate, dried it, put it back in the cabinet exactly where Florence had always kept it. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen at 7:30. Roxanne stood at the counter using Florence's espresso machine, the one Florence had saved for 3 months to buy researching models and reading reviews, finally ordering it for our 40th anniversary. She'd made us lattes every Sunday morning since. Roxanne was making herself a cappuccino phone propped against the backsplash, watching some YouTube tutorial about contouring makeup. I stopped in the doorway, blinked slowly, let my eyes go slightly unfocused. "Florence, son," I said, "is that you?" Roxanne's head snapped up. "What?" "I've been looking everywhere." I walked closer, squinting at her. "Have you seen my drafting compass? I need to check the bridge calculations before the inspection." Silence. Roxanne stared at me. I'd retired from engineering 3 years ago. There were no bridge calculations, no inspection. Everyone knew that. "I'm not Florence," Roxanne said slowly. "I'm Roxanne, your daughter-in-law, remember?" I frowned, tilted my head like I was trying to remember something just out of reach. "Roxanne, when did you get here? Where's Florence?" "She was making coffee just a minute ago." Brent appeared in the doorway behind me, still in his pajamas. Roxanne's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. I saw it happen, the realization spreading across her face like dawn. The slight widening of her pupils, the barely suppressed smile. She thought I was losing it. "Dad," Brent said quietly. "Mom's gone. Remember, the funeral was 3 days ago." I blinked at him. Let confusion cloud my features. "Funeral? No, that can't be right. She was just here." I heard her voice. Roxanne set down the coffee cup, walked past me into the hallway where Brent stood. I heard them whispering, urgent, excited. "Did you see that?" Roxanne hissed. "He thinks I'm his dead wife. He's totally gone." "Maybe we should call a doctor," Brent said. "Are you kidding? This is perfect. He won't fight the POA if he can't even remember what day it is." 10 minutes later, I was back in the guest room. Roxanne's voice drifted up through the heating vent. She was on the phone in the living room directly below. "How, girl, you won't believe this," she said. "He's already losing it. Called me Florence this morning, asked about bridge calculations from a job he retired from 3 years ago. He's totally confused. This is going to be easier than I thought. Way easier." 40 years of engineering had taught me one thing above all else. The most dangerous structures are the ones that look stable from the outside. I heard Roxanne in the hallway phone pressed to her ear, laughing as she told her friend how easy this was going to be. She thought my mind was failing. She thought I was slipping away into confusion and grief. She had no idea I had just laid the first brick in the prison I was building for her. 2 days after the funeral, I watched from the hallway as Roxanne pulled open every drawer in Florence's home office, not looking for memories to preserve, but for assets to liquidate. She had been building her case brick by brick. Now I was watching her hand me the evidence. Florence's office was a small room at the back of the house, overlooking the garden she'd spent 30 years cultivating. Bookshelves lined with teaching manuals and children's literature. A desk Florence had inherited from her mother, scarred oak with brass handles that stuck. File folders organized by year lesson plans from 1993 parent-teacher conference notes, from 2001 student thank you cards, saved in manila envelopes labeled by decade. Roxanne yanked open the bottom drawer. Papers flew out, some fell to the floor, some she tossed aside. She wasn't organizing. She was hunting. Here, she said, pulling out a forest green folder. I knew there had to be something. Brent appeared in the doorway beside me. I shuffled backward, playing the confused old man, letting him pass. He walked into the office, looked at Roxanne holding the folder like a trophy. What is it? He asked. She opened it, scanned the first page, and her face transformed. Pure greed undisguised. Florence Hewitt Memorial Education Fund. She read aloud. Purpose annual scholarships for teachers pursuing advanced degrees, community library renovation, literacy programs for underserved schools. She flipped to the second page. Current balance $250,000. The room went silent, except for the ticking of Florence's grandmother clock in the hallway. Brent stared at the folder. That's a charitable fund, Roxanne. You can't just take... Watch me. She cut him off, voice sharp as broken glass. It's in our name now. The estate controls it. That money is just sitting there doing nothing while we're drowning in your gambling debt. Gambling debt. There it was. The real reason for the urgency, the moving trucks the same day as the funeral, the desperate hunt through Florence's belongings. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate. But it's for teachers, Brent said weakly. Mom set that up for, your mother is dead. Roxanne's voice was flat final. And we're alive. We have bills. We have creditors calling every single day. This money can clear everything and give us a fresh start. What kind of person steals from teachers, from children, from a dead woman's charitable legacy built over 30 years of public service? I stood in the hallway leaning against the wall like I needed support, eyes half closed, like I was drifting into confusion. But I was listening, recording every word in the mental evidence file that grew heavier by the hour. Roxanne tucked the folder under her arm. I'm calling Nathan tomorrow. He'll know how to transfer this into the household account. That's fraud, Brent said. That's actual fraud, Roxanne. Only if someone reports it. She looked at him. And who's going to do that? Your father can't even remember what day it is. She walked past me without a glance. Brent followed, shoulders slumped, defeated. I waited until I heard their bedroom door close upstairs. Then I stood in Florence's office doorway, looking at the chaos Roxanne had created. Drawers hanging open, papers scattered across the floor. The desk lamp Florence had used to grade papers late into the night knocked sideways, still burning. I closed the door, turned off the lamp, left everything else exactly as it was. Evidence. That night, I waited until the house went dark. Until I heard Roxanne's and Brent's breathing settle into sleep through the thin walls. Then I went to the master bedroom closet. They'd taken most of Florence's clothes, but they'd left the cramped space behind her shoe boxes, where she stored out-of-season items. I knelt on the hardwood floor, pushed aside the boxes, and saw it. A small brown leather notebook tucked between the wall and the baseboard. Hidden. My hands shook as I pulled it free. The leather was worn soft from handling. I opened it to the first page, Florence's handwriting. Neat, precise, the same handwriting that had graded 1,000,000 spelling tests and written encouraging notes on struggling students' essays. The date at the top, June 15th, 2021. 3 years ago. I sat on the closet floor back against the wall and started reading. Stikaktina. Today Roxanne asked for the 3rd time this month about the house appraisal. Brent changed the subject. He knows what she's doing, but won't stop her. I flipped forward, page after page. Dates, observations, conversations Florence had overheard. October 2021. Roxanne mentioned selling the house when the time comes. She said it to Brent at Sunday dinner, thought I was in the kitchen. I was in the hallway. I heard everything. April 2022. She asked about my life insurance policy. How much, who the beneficiary was, when it would pay out. November 2022. Brent tried to talk to her about getting help for the gambling. She told him to mind his own business. He hasn't brought it up since. My wife had been documenting this for years. While I went to work, while I worried about bridge inspections and load calculations, while I kissed her goodnight and told her everything would be fine with Brent's marriage, she had been building a case. I turned to the last pages, the handwriting shakier, now weaker. Dated August 2023, 2 weeks before she died. Lawrence, if you're reading this, then it happened. I'm sorry I couldn't stay to help you fight, but I left you everything you need. Trust Stanley, protect the fund, and remember you taught bridges to stand. Now teach them to fall. My vision blurred. I pressed my palm against my eyes, but the tears came anyway. She had been dying, literally dying, losing her hair to chemotherapy, her body failing cell by cell, and she had spent those final months not in bitterness, but in preparation, building a fortress I couldn't yet see. I sat on that closet floor until my back ached, reading Florence's neat handwriting by the dim overhead light. 3 years. She had known for 3 years and never said a word to me, not because she didn't trust me, but because she was protecting me from having to choose between my son and justice. She had made the choice for me, and she had left me the blueprint. The granddaughter I had never been allowed to claim walked through the morning fog at Piedmont Park, carrying an envelope from the grave, and everything Florence had prepared for this war. Florence's notebook had ended with instructions, a time, a place, a name I hadn't spoken in 23 years. I sat on a bench by the duck pond at 6 in the morning, September mist, hanging thick over the water. Oak trees dripped condensation. I held a cup of gas station coffee that had gone cold in my hands. Then I saw her, Valentina Graves. 23, walked toward me through the fog in an Emory Law hoodie, carrying a laptop bag and a thick manila envelope. She had Florence's eyes, the same gray-green that could read a lying student from across a classroom. The granddaughter Brent had thrown away when he was 19. The baby Roxanne had made him abandon before they'd even gotten married. The girl I'd begged to help raise until Brent had cut me off completely, saying I had to choose him or his mistake. I had chosen him, and I had regretted it for 23 years. Valentina sat on the bench, maintaining professional distance. She placed the envelope between us. "Grandma sent this to me 3 months ago," she said. Her voice was steady, controlled. She said I'd know when to open it. I opened it the day after the funeral. I picked up the envelope. Heavy, legal documents inside. "I didn't know she was in contact with you," I said. "She's been in contact with me since I was born. Every month. Like clockwork." I opened the envelope. Trust documents, transfer forms, bank statements showing payments from something called Oakwood Educational Trust. And underneath it all, a letter in Florence's handwriting addressed to Valentina. But what stopped my breath was the photograph. Florence, standing 50 feet away from a university building partially hidden behind a stone pillar. In the foreground, a younger Valentina, 19 years old, first-year law student, walking toward the entrance with a backpack. Florence at Valentina's first day of law school. Present, but invisible. "She was there," I said, throat tight. "At your first day, you didn't see her." "She was always there, Grandpa." Valentina's voice cracked slightly on the word. "Every tuition payment, every apartment deposit, every textbook. The shell corporation was called Oakwood Educational Trust. I just didn't know it was her until I read the letter. I read Florence's letter, dated 3 months before she died when the cancer had already spread. My dearest Emma, it began. Florence had always called her by her first name, Emma Valentina Graves, even though Valentina went by her middle name. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And if you're reading this, Lawrence needs you. He doesn't know it yet, but he's about to fight a war he can't win alone. Trust him. Help him. And know that every sacrifice I made to keep you hidden from Brent and Roxanne was worth it. You are my legacy. Not the money. Not the house. You. Emma didn't need my protection. Florence had made sure of that. What Emma needed and what I needed was each other. Her top 5% at Emory, Valentina said. Full scholarship, but Grandma covered living expenses, books, everything the scholarship didn't touch. She made sure I'd never owe anyone anything. Why now? I asked. Why reach out now? Valentina pulled a second document from the envelope. Florence's will identical to the one Stanley held. Because I'm the contingent beneficiary, Valentina said quietly. If your son forfeits his inheritance, which Grandma predicted he would, everything goes to me. The house, the investments, the fund. And she put me at the center. Florence had done this years ago. Before the cancer, before she even got sick. She'd been planning since Valentina was in high school. There's one more thing, Valentina said. I start working at Stanley Lockwood's firm on Monday. Paralegal position. He says you'll need someone on the inside. Florence had recruited her, trained her, positioned her exactly where I'd need her. I looked at my granddaughter, the one I'd lost, the one Florence had saved, and felt something shift inside me. Not grief, purpose. That night, I waited until the house went dark, until Roxanne and Brent were asleep in my bedroom. Then I went downstairs to the soundproof office I'd built years ago for late-night engineering work. I locked the door, booted up the computer system I'd installed 2 years ago when Florence first got sick. 3 monitors flickered to life. A dashboard appeared, 8 camera feeds, time-stamped recording continuously. Pinhole cameras and smoke detectors in crown molding and the thermostat. I'd installed them when Florence was in hospice care, worried about home health aides. Florence had known about them, had encouraged it, telling me I was being appropriately paranoid. Now I understood why. I pulled up the footage from the past 5 days. Since the funeral. Frame by frame, I watched Roxanne's invasion unfold in digital clarity. September 15th, Roxanne on the phone in the living room, calling someone about a fundraiser venue and something big named after Florence. September 16th, Brent removing family photos, hesitating before throwing them in the garage. September 17th, Roxanne in Florence's office finding the Memorial Fund documents. Every great structure begins with a blueprint. Florence had drawn mine in invisible ink, and I was only now seeing the lines. I created folders on the external hard drive, labeled them Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. Started exporting files, organizing evidence like I used to organize structural load calculations. Then I picked up my phone and called Stanley Lockwood. "Stanley," I said when he answered. "It's time." Florence was right about everything. "I've been waiting for this call for 7 years, Lawrence," Stanley said. "What do you need?" "A war room," I said, "and a paralegal named Valentina Graves." I hung up with Stanley and looked at the wall of monitors showing every room of my house. Roxanne thought she was the predator. She thought this was her hunting ground. She didn't know I had been building a cage around her for 5 days, camera by camera, conversation by conversation. The hunter had become the architect, 9 days after burying my wife. Roxanne sat me down in front of a 75-inch television I had never seen before and announced she was going to throw a $250,000 party in Florence's name. The architect builds, the cameras watch. Now I waited for her to finish the cage herself. I had come downstairs that evening to find the living room rearranged. My old television, the 40-inch model Florence and I had bought on sale in 2015, was gone. In its place, mounted on the wall like a monument to excess, hung a massive screen that dominated the room. Roxanne stood beside it, remote control in hand, looking like a corporate presenter. "Family meeting," she called toward the stairs. "Brent, get down here." I shuffled to my usual chair, the leather recliner Florence had given me for my 60th birthday. Played confused, squinting at the massive screen. "When did we get a new television?" I asked. "So did I," Roxanne said. "The old one was ancient. We needed an upgrade for presentations." Presentations. In my living room. Brent appeared, looking uncomfortable. He sat on the couch as far from me as the furniture allowed. Roxanne clicked the remote. The screen blazed to life. A PowerPoint slide appeared, professionally designed with elegant fonts and stock photos of smiling children in classrooms. Title slide: The Florence Hewitt Legacy Charity Gala. Subtitle: Celebrating Education. Honoring Service. Building Tomorrow. She had been planning this for days. While I grieved, while I pretended to lose my mind, she had been building a PowerPoint presentation. "I've been working on something special," Roxanne said, voice taking on that performative warmth I'd heard at PTA meetings and church fundraisers. "A way to honor Mom's legacy and make a real impact in the community." She clicked to the next slide. A photograph of Florence in her classroom surrounded by third graders. I recognized it, taken in 2019, the year before she got sick. One of her students had snapped it and sent it to us as a thank you. Roxanne had stolen it from Florence's desk. The Florence Hewitt Legacy Charity Gala. Roxanne read from the screen. November 15th, Ritz-Carlton, Buckhead. A night to celebrate education community and the power of giving back. 200 guests. Media coverage. Atlanta's finest coming together to support teachers. She clicked again. New slide: Event highlights. Bullet points appeared. Keynote speaker on education reform. Silent auction featuring local artists. Live performance by Atlanta Symphony musicians. Instagram influencer red carpet coverage. Launch of the Roxanne Hewitt Foundation. I blinked at that last line. Read it again to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The Roxanne Hewitt Foundation. Not Florence, Roxanne. "This is going to put Mom's legacy on the map," Roxanne said. "I've already reached out to the Journal-Constitution about coverage. WSB-TV is interested in doing a segment. We're talking major exposure." She clicked to the budget slide. Preliminary budget breakdown, it read. Venue rental, $45,000. Catering, $38,000. Event coordination, $22,000. Influencer appearance fees, $18,000. Photography and videography, $15,000. Gala wardrobe, $12,000. Floral arrangements, $8,000. Live music, $7,000. Printing and invitations, $6,000. Valet services, $4,000. Total $247,000. I stared at the numbers. Did the math automatically? 42 years of engineering made it involuntary. $247,000 for a party. Not 1 cent for a teacher. Not 1 cent for a library. How do you spend a dead woman's charitable fund on champagne and call it philanthropy? I pointed at the screen, playing the confused old man. I see all these numbers for the party," I said slowly. "But where's the part about the teachers? Florence set that money aside for scholarships. Will they get any of it?" Roxanne's smile didn't waver. She'd prepared for this question. "That's the beauty of it, Dad." She clicked to another slide, a photograph of teachers in a classroom, generic stock photo. "The awareness is the donation. We're creating a platform, a movement. The exposure is what matters. When people see what we're doing, when they see the Roxanne Hewitt Foundation supporting education that creates momentum. That's worth more than just writing checks. Brent shifted on the couch, opened his mouth like he might object. Chuntisai, the teachers benefit from the attention we bring to education. Roxanne continued, cutting him off before he could speak. From the conversation we start. From the visibility. Visibility. Not scholarships. Not books. Not classroom supplies. Visibility. She clicked through more slides. Guest list projections. Media contact information. A timeline leading up to November 15th. She'd been planning this for weeks. Maybe months. While Florence was dying while I was watching my wife fade, Roxanne had been designing her social debut on the corpse of Florence's charity. "I'll need you to sign off on the fund disbursement," Roxanne said, turning to face me. "Since you're technically still the account holder, just a formality, we can do that tomorrow." A formality. $250,000, and she called it a formality. I nodded slowly like I was processing information through fog. "Si puisi." "Florence would want this," Roxanne said. "She'd want her memory celebrated. She'd want people to know what she stood for." I looked at the screen, at the budget slide still glowing there, at the line item that read, "Gala wardrobe $12,000. Florence had bought her dresses at Marshall's. Had worn the same 3 outfits to every school event for 5 years because she'd rather spend money on classroom supplies than clothes. And Roxanne was going to spend $12,000 on a single dress to wear to a party supposedly honoring her. I had spent 40 years building structures designed to hold weight. She had just told me that empty air was load-bearing. 200 guests. I said, still playing confused but letting a hint of wonder creep into my voice. "That's a lot of people." "It needs to be big," Roxanne said. "This is about making an impact, creating a legacy." November 15th is going to be a night Atlanta remembers. She wanted 200 guests. She wanted media coverage. She wanted Atlanta Journal-Constitution photographers and WSB-TV cameras. She was building the perfect stage not for a charity event, but for her own public execution. And she had just handed me front-row tickets. 3 days after announcing her $250,000 party, Roxanne walked into the living room carrying a document that would give her the legal authority to sell my house, drain my accounts, and lock me in a psychiatric facility if I were foolish enough to sign it correctly. The stage was built. Now she needed the keys to everything I owned. I sat in my recliner watching the evening news with the sound off, pretending not to notice her enter, pretending not to see the manila folder in her hands. She placed it on the coffee table, sat on the couch, folded her hands like a concerned daughter. "Then," she said, voice dripping with false sweetness, "we need to do some paperwork. For your protection." She opened the folder and pulled out a business card. "I had a notary come by last Thursday while you were resting. Remember, sweet young woman, very professional. She pre-signed the witness block. All you need to do is add your signature on the last page and we're done." A notary who pre-signed blank witness blocks. A notary Roxanne had paid. The kind of procedural corner-cutting that works perfectly until someone checks the commission number against the Georgia Secretary of State database, which Stanley would do within 24 hours. I looked up slowly, blinking like I was surfacing from confusion. Paperwork. These documents, so we can help manage things while you're not at your best. She opened the folder, pulled out a thick stack of stapled pages. "The bank won't talk to us without proper authorization, and with the gala coming up, we need access to the memorial fund." She slid the documents across the coffee table. I picked them up, adjusted my reading glasses, started reading from the top. Durable power of attorney. I read aloud, stumbling slightly. State of Georgia. I, Lawrence Hewitt, being of sound mind. I looked up at her. Am I of sound mind? Roxanne's smile tightened. It's just legal language, Dad. Keep reading. I turned back to the document. Read slowly, finger along the lines. I hereby appoint Roxanne Marie Hewitt as my attorney, in fact. I looked up again. What does that mean, attorney in fact? Is that like a lawyer? It means I can help you, Roxanne said. Make decisions when you're confused. Handle the finances. I kept reading. Page 2 detailed the scope of authority. Real estate transactions, banking access, investment management, medical decisions. Medical decisions. I slowed down when I reached section 7. Authority to make healthcare choices, including placement in assisted living or memory care facilities. I looked at Roxanne. What's memory care? Don't worry about that part, Roxanne said quickly. That's just if you ever need extra help. Standard boilerplate language. Standard boilerplate. The kind that let her have me involuntarily committed. I turned to page 3. Section 9 gave her authority to represent me in all legal proceedings. Section 11 allowed her to sell, transfer, or mortgage any real property I owned, including the house. How many people sign away their entire lives on a Tuesday evening? How many hand over their homes, their freedom, their right to say no, all with one signature? Brent appeared in the doorway, leaned against the frame with his arms crossed, listening. This seems like a lot, I said, still playing confused. Maybe I should have a lawyer look at it. You don't need a lawyer, Roxanne said. Her voice had an edge now. This is what families do. We take care of each other. You took care of me and Brent. Now we take care of you. Took care of me like I was a burden. I flipped back to the signature page, saw the blank line, witnessed by 2 signature lines below. You don't need to read the whole thing, Roxanne said. It's 12 pages of legal jargon. Just sign the last page so we can help you. Help me, protect me from her. I reached for the pen Roxanne had placed beside the document. Picked it up slowly, hand trembling slightly, not from age, from the effort of not laughing. I had spent 40 years reading engineering specifications, contract language liability clauses. I could read legal documents in my sleep. Every word of this POA had been carefully chosen to transfer complete control of my life into Roxanne's hands, and she thought I was too senile to understand it. I positioned the pen over the signature line. Right there, Roxanne said, pointing. Where it says principal's signature, I began to write, slowly, carefully. Each letter taking effort. HAROLDHEWITT. Not Lawrence, Harold, a name that didn't exist. A signature that invalidated the entire document from the first letter. 40 years of engineering had taught me that the details people overlook are always the ones that matter most. A misaligned bolt, a miscalculated load, a signature that doesn't match the name on the deed. I set down the pen. Roxanne snatched up the document before the ink could dry. Glanced at it, but not at the signature line. Just checking that I'd signed somewhere. She hadn't actually read it. Hadn't verified. She just assumed. Good, she said. Stood up. Tucked the folder under her arm. Good boy, Dad. This will make everything so much easier. Good boy. Like I was a dog who had finally learned a trick. Brent pushed off from the doorway, followed Roxanne toward the stairs. He glanced back at me once. Something flickered in his eyes, guilt maybe. But he didn't say anything. Didn't stop her. Didn't check the signature. He just followed his wife upstairs. I sat in my recliner listening to their footsteps overhead. Listening to Roxanne's voice muffled through the ceiling, already on the phone. Probably her lawyer. Probably telling him she had the POA, she had control, she could move forward. She had nothing. She had a piece of paper signed by Harold Hewitt. A person who didn't exist. A signature that made the entire document legally void ab initio void from inception. When she tried to use it at the bank, when she presented it to her lawyer, when she attempted to leverage it, they would ask for identification. They would compare the signature to my driver's license, my passport, my social security card, and they would find that Lawrence Hewitt had never signed the document at all. She walked out of that room holding a piece of paper she thought gave her the power to institutionalize me, sell my house, and drain every account. She called me good boy, like I was a trained dog who had finally learned to obey. She never looked at the signature, and when she tried to use that document when she discovered Harold Hewitt didn't exist, it would already be too late. I sat in my Lincoln 50 feet from the Wells Fargo entrance, watching Roxanne walk through the glass doors, carrying her fake power of attorney like it was a winning lottery ticket, and I knew exactly what she was about to discover. Harold Hewitt's signature hadn't been tested yet, but that wasn't the trap she was walking into today. She'd dressed for the occasion. Navy blazer pearls hair pulled back in a professional bun, looking every inch the responsible daughter-in-law managing an elderly father's affairs. She carried a leather portfolio probably contained the POA account numbers withdrawal forms she'd filled out in advance. She thought she was about to walk out with control of $250,000. I'd parked where I could see through the bank's floor-to-ceiling windows. Watched her approach the teller counter. Watched her smile professional and confident. Watched her slide documents across the counter to Ms. Patterson, the Wells Fargo senior teller who handled high-value account requests, with the professional detachment of someone who had seen every type of financial desperation walk through those doors. Ms. Patterson picked up the POA, read it, turned to her computer, typed, frowned, typed more, looked back at Roxanne, shook her head. I couldn't hear the conversation from 50 feet away in a parked car, but I could read body language. 40 years of engineering meetings, client presentations, contract negotiations, I knew what rejection looked like. Roxanne's posture stiffened. Her hand gestured at the documents. Ms. Patterson's expression remained neutral, professional. She pointed at her computer screen. Explained something. Roxanne leaned forward, voice rising enough that I could see the shift in her shoulders. Ms. Patterson shook her head again. Final, definitive. Roxanne snatched the documents off the counter. Turned. Walked toward the exit with quick, angry strides. Her face was flushed, jaw clenched. The professional composure shattered. She passed within 10 feet of my Lincoln. Never looked in my direction. Too focused on her rage to notice the old man in the driver's seat, who was smiling for the first time in 2 weeks. How does it feel when greed hits a wall it didn't know existed? When the money you can smell, taste, almost touch, sits on the other side of a signature you'll never get. I waited until her car pulled out of the parking lot. Then I drove home. Slowly. Carefully. Playing the confused old man even when no one was watching, just in case. That evening, I sat in my soundproof office and called a number I hadn't dialed in years. Nadine Castillo answered on the second ring. "Lawrence," she said. Her voice was warm, familiar. "I was wondering when you'd call." Nadine Castillo, 60, directed the Atlanta Community Education Fund and had been Florence's Spelman College roommate in 1979, the second signature Roxanne would never convince. "She went to the bank today," I said. "I know. I got the alert at 10:17 this morning." Alert. Florence had set up alerts. "Tell me," I said. Nadine laughed soft and sad. "Your wife was something else, Lawrence. You know that, right?" I did know, but I was learning just how much. 7 years ago. Nadine said, "Florence called me out of the blue. We'd been Christmas card friends for years, you know, the kind who catch up every few years, reminisce about college. But this call was different. She said she needed to ask me something important." I leaned back in my chair, listening. She told me she was setting up a memorial education fund. Said she wanted to make sure it actually went to teachers, not just got absorbed into estate management or administrative costs. She asked me to be the co-trustee. Why didn't she tell me? I asked. Nadine was quiet for a moment. Then, she said, and I'm quoting here, "Lawrence is an engineer. He trusts his own calculations too much. He'd try to manage it himself, build safeguards himself, and miss the human element. I need someone he can't talk out of it. Someone who knows how to say no." That sounded exactly like Florence, knowing my weaknesses better than I did. "So you've been the co-trustee for 7 years, I said. "And Roxanne just found out today." "She found out there's a co-trustee," Nadine corrected. "She doesn't know it's me. The bank won't disclose that information. But yes, any transaction on that fund requires both our signatures. Florence made that ironclad. And the alerts, automatic notifications for any attempted access, any inquiry, any request for information. Florence set them up when she opened the account. I get a text and an email within 5 minutes of any activity." Nadine paused. "Lawrence, your wife, was sick for 3 years. During that time, she built a system to protect her life's work from people who would exploit it. She anticipated every move." I looked at Florence's notebook on my desk, the brown leather worn soft from handling. "Oh, she knew," I said. 3 years ago, she already knew what Roxanne would try. "She knew what people like Roxanne always try," Nadine said. "She'd been a teacher for 30 years. She'd seen parents steal from PTA funds, administrators divert scholarship money board members, treat charity accounts like personal checking. She knew exactly what to protect against. Engineers call it redundancy building backup systems into critical structures. Florence had built redundancy into her entire life. A second signature automatic alerts, a college friend who owed her nothing but gave her everything. What happens now? I asked. Now. Nadine's voice took on an edge. Now they can't touch the fund. They can plan their fancy gala, they can print their invitations, they can reserve the Ritz-Carlton, but they can't access 1 cent without both our signatures. And I will never sign anything that doesn't put money directly into teachers' hands. Thank you, I said, for being her friend, for doing this. Lawrence Florence was my roommate for 4 years at Spelman. She helped me pass calculus. She talked me through my first breakup. She was my maid of honor in 1984. Nadine's voice caught. When she called 7 years ago and asked me to be the guardian of her legacy, I didn't even hesitate. Some friendships are built to last longer than lifetimes. I hung up and sat in the quiet office looking at the wall of monitors showing every room of my house. Roxanne was upstairs, pacing, phone to her ear, probably calling her lawyer, demanding to know how this happened, how there could be a co-trustee she didn't know about. She didn't know Nadine existed. She didn't know Nadine had been Florence's college roommate for 4 years. She didn't know that some friendships are built to last longer than lifetimes. And she had no idea that every move she made from this moment forward would be monitored, recorded, and reported to the 2 people who held every card she thought she owned. The Instagram post showed me standing in front of a Rothko at the High Museum, looking deliberately confused, while Roxanne's caption read, "Spending quality time with Dad," and her 180,000 followers ate it up like it was charity instead of cruelty. Roxanne couldn't access the fund, so she shifted tactics. If she couldn't steal Florence's money, she'd steal her narrative. It started the first week of October. Roxanne dressed me up like a prop and dragged me to the High Museum of Art, positioned me in front of abstract paintings, took photos from angles that made me look small, lost, confused. Look at the painting, Dad," she'd said, phone held high. "No, tilt your head like you're trying to figure it out. Perfect." The post went up that afternoon. A photo of me squinting at a Rothko head, tilted, looking utterly baffled. The caption, "Spending quality time with dad while planning mom's legacy event, hashtag family first, hashtag Alzheimer's awareness." 180,000 followers, thousands of likes, hundreds of comments. So sweet. "You're such a good daughter-in-law, bless his heart." Nobody asked why she was posting photos instead of actually spending time with me. Nobody wondered why quality time required documentation for social media. The campaign continued. Bones Steakhouse photo of me holding a menu upside down, her caption, "He still makes me laugh." The little moments matter most. Piedmont Park, me on a bench looking at ducks, her caption, "Simple joys with my favorite person." Every post got thousands of engagements. Every post built her brand as the devoted caregiver. Every post was another brick in the public persona she was constructing for the gala. I played along, acted confused when she needed confused, smiled vacantly when she needed vacant, and I watched her follower count climb. Then, on October 12th, someone left a comment on the High Museum post. Anonymous account, generic profile picture. The comment read, "Wait, is this the same Roxanne from the Peachtree Arts fundraiser scandal in 2019? I was scrolling through her Instagram on my phone. She'd never blocked me, never imagined I knew how to use social media when I saw it. The comment had been posted 4 minutes ago. I took a screenshot. Then I watched, waited, counted. 43 seconds later, the comment disappeared. Deleted. How many likes does it take to justify using your father-in-law's grief as content? How many heart emojis equal 1 ounce of actual humanity? I saved the screenshot to my evidence folder, labeled it Exhibit C Instagram Exploitation plus 2019 Scandal Reference, Peachtree Arts, 2019. I made a note to ask Valentina to research it. The Instagram posts continued through October. But something had shifted. Roxanne checked her comments obsessively now. Deleted anything that mentioned Peachtree, anything that asked questions, anything that wasn't pure adoration. She was worried. Good. Then, on October 28th, my phone buzzed with a text message. Mrs. Calloway. She had lived 3 doors down for 30 years, attended every one of Florence's summer garden parties, and still remembered when Brent learned to ride a bike on this street. Her text read, "Lawrence, I just saw Brent at that antique shop on Roswell Road. He was selling jewelry. I thought you should know. I read the message 3 times. Then I got in my car. The antique shop was 15 minutes away. I drove carefully, hands steady on the wheel, mind racing through possibilities. What jewelry Florence's pieces were in her jewelry box in the bedroom. I'd seen them there last week when I was cleaning, except I hadn't checked in 3 days, and Brent had keys to everything. I parked in front of the shop, walked inside. The bell above the door chimed. Mr. Hendricks, the antique shop owner on Roswell Road, had the uncomfortable look of a man who'd just realized he'd bought stolen family heirlooms from a desperate son. "Can I help you?" he asked. "My neighbor said my son was here earlier," I said. "Selling jewelry." Mr. Hendricks's expression shifted. Recognition, then guilt. "You must be Mr. Hewitt. What did he sell?" Mr. Hendricks walked to the jewelry case, pulled out a small velvet box, opened it. Florence's wedding ring, not the engagement ring that one was buried with her. This was the pearl ring I'd bought her in Savannah in 1982. We weren't even engaged yet. I'd spent 3 months' salary on it. She'd worn it on her right hand every single day for 40 years, and Brent had sold it. He also brought 3 old letters in envelopes, Mr. Hendricks said quietly, and a small wooden music box. I only bought the ring. The letters and the music box, another customer bought those this morning. They're gone. Gone. Letters in Florence's handwriting. The music box her grandmother had given her. Irreplaceable pieces of her life sold to strangers, scattered to people who would never know what they meant. "How much?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow. "For the ring? How much did you give him?" Mr. Hendricks looked down. $400. $400. I'd spent almost $2,000 on that ring in 1982. Adjusted for inflation, it was worth more than $5,000 today. And Brent had sold it, sold his mother's ring, the ring she'd treasured, the ring that had been on her hand in 1,000 photographs, for $400. "I'll buy it back," I said. "How much?" "$600," Mr. Hendricks said. Then, seeing my face, "I'm sorry. That's the market price for—" "I'll pay it." I pulled out my wallet, counted out $600 bills, took the velvet box, held it in my hand. There are some things money can buy back: houses, cars, even stolen jewelry if you're lucky. But you can't buy back letters written in your wife's handwriting. You can't buy back 40 years of a ring warming against her finger. You can't recover the music box that played the lullaby Florence had hummed to Brent when he was a baby. I stood in that antique shop holding the small velvet box and felt something break inside me that I hadn't known was still whole. The first real tears since I'd found Florence's notebook. Not for the ring, for what it represented. Brent hadn't just sold jewelry. He'd sold the last tangible pieces of his mother's love. Sold them for pocket change. Sold them and went home to his wife and probably never thought about them again. I put the ring in my breast pocket right next to Florence's last letter from the notebook. Some things you hold on to not because you can fix them, but because letting go would mean you never loved them at all. Brent had let go. I never would. And that difference, that single difference, was going to cost him everything. I was watching my daughter-in-law commit fraud in real time, and she had no idea I had a front-row seat. The hidden camera in her home office captured every pixel of the Zoom call on her screenline items, dollar amounts, and the word "revised" in bold red letters across what was supposed to be the Florence Hewitt Memorial Education Fund budget. The ring sat in my breast pocket, warm against my heart. But grief would have to wait. Florence had taught me that much. It was 2:47 p.m. on October 18th when I sat in my soundproof office watching the monitor feed from Roxanne's home office upstairs. The cameras I'd installed 2 years ago had been worth every penny. Roxanne sat at Florence's antique desk, laptop open, talking to someone on Zoom. The camera angle was perfect. I could see her screen reflected in the window behind her. An Excel spreadsheet, 2 columns, side by side, actual cost and reported to fund. Ritz-Carlton Grand Ballroom, $8,500, actual $12,000 reported. Floral arrangements, $2,200, actual $4,500 reported. DJ services, $1,800, actual $3,200 reported. Luxury car service, $900, actual $2,400 reported. I did the math automatically. Total inflation, $9,600. The original vendors won't cross-check, Roxanne said into her laptop. They got paid what they invoiced. What the fund ledger shows is our business. The voice on the other end responded, and the donation matching from the estate. Roxanne smiled. That's the beauty. Lawrence matches dollar for dollar what the fund spends. He's literally paying us to rob him. My hands gripped the armrests. 42 years of engineering discipline kept me from walking upstairs and confronting her. Instead, I took screenshots. Every frame, every cell of that spreadsheet. I opened Florence's notebook. Section 12, financial manipulation. Florence had written 3 years ago. Expect invoice fraud. She'll inflate the gala expenses and pocket the difference. The Ritz-Carlton will be the first target. Get the original invoices. Florence had predicted this. Down to the specific vendor. I picked up my phone, started making calls. We're Ritz-Carlton, Buckhead. This is Jennifer speaking. How may I assist you? The Ritz-Carlton manager had that particular blend of professionalism and sympathy that comes from years of handling wealthy people's grief events, her voice warm but efficient as she pulled up our account. My name is Lawrence Hewitt, I said. My wife passed in September. I'm conducting a personal audit of her memorial fund to ensure it operates with the integrity she deserved. Could you provide the original invoice for our November 16th gala booking? Mr. Hewitt, of course. I'm so sorry for your loss. Keyboard clicks. We have you down for the grand ballroom on November 16th. The contracted rate is $8,500. I'll email the signed contract right away. Next call, Bella Flora Designs. The florist's voice carried the slight accent of someone who'd learned English through flower names first, lilies and roses, perfectly pronounced grammar, occasionally creative. I'm conducting a personal audit, I said. What did we agree on for the centerpieces? Oh, Mr. Hewitt. Yes, your daughter-in-law approved last week. 20 arrangements, white lilies and baby's breath. $2,200 total. Beautiful choice white lilies, just like in the photo she showed me. White lilies, Florence's favorite flower, the ones that had covered her casket, the ones I'd held at the grave while Roxanne whispered about stealing everything Florence had built. I had to set down the phone, just for a moment. The scent memory hit me, lilies filling the sanctuary, overwhelming everything. I gripped the desk edge until my knuckles went white. Roxanne was stealing from the dead, using the flowers meant to honor them. I picked up the phone again. Thank you, I said. Could you email me a copy of the invoice? Of course, I send right now. 2 more calls. DJ Martinez. Entertainment $1,800 for 4 hours. Executive car service $900 for transportation. Every vendor cooperative. Every invoice emailed within the hour. I printed everything in triplicate. Created a comparison table. Original invoices on the left. Roxanne's inflated numbers on the right. The $9,600 discrepancy highlighted in yellow. Exhibit E. That evening, after Roxanne and Brent had gone to bed, I went to my study. Walked to the bookshelf where a framed blueprint hung my design for a pedestrian bridge over the Golden Gate Strait, a project that never got built, but that Florence had insisted on framing anyway. Because foundations matter, she'd said, even when nobody sees them. I lifted the frame off the wall. Behind it, a small wall safe. I entered the combination 09151956. Florence's birthday. The lock clicked. A sound I'd heard dozens of times, but tonight it felt different. Like a countdown timer. Each exhibit I added brought us closer to the gala. Closer to the moment when everything would destroy my son's life. Inside the safe, a growing dossier. Exhibit a power of attorney with Harold Hewitt's signature. Void ab initio. Exhibit B bank rejection letter. Nadine's co-trustee protection. Exhibit C Instagram exploitation screenshots. Exhibit D wedding ring receipt. $400 for 40 years of love. Exhibit E original versus falsified invoices. $9,600 of documented fraud. I placed the new folder carefully inside. 47 pages now. I opened Florence's notebook again. Flipped to the end. She'd labeled them. Exhibit A through Exhibit G. 7 total. I had 5. 2 more were coming. Florence had predicted them. Whatever F and G would be, they'd be worse than what I'd already collected. The gala wasn't just a memorial Florence had written. It's a courtroom. Every guest is a witness. Every dollar she steals is a nail in her coffin. I closed the safe. Repositioned the Golden Gate Bridge frame. I'd built bridges for 40 years. Load calculations, stress tests, failure points. This was the same mathematics, just measuring human greed instead of steel tension. I labeled the folder Exhibit E and placed it in the safe next to the others. 5 down, 2 to go. Florence had predicted 7 disasters, 7 pieces of evidence that would damn Roxanne completely. I didn't know what F and G would be yet, but I knew this if my wife's blueprint had been perfect. So far, the last 2 exhibits wouldn't just be evidence. They'd be the ones that destroyed my son's marriage, his future, and any chance he'd ever forgive me for choosing justice over family. The camera feed glowed on my monitor. Roxanne was still on the phone, still laughing, still digging. Crocodile. Stanley Lockwood's corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Midtown Atlanta, but I wasn't there for the view. I was there to deliver 47 video clips, 23 audio recordings, 8 falsified invoices, and the notebook that had predicted all of it. Roxanne was still digging. Now it was time to show her she'd been digging her own grave. I set the encrypted hard drive on Stanley's mahogany conference table, placed 5 manila folders beside it labeled A through E, each one a nail in Roxanne's coffin. Each one predicted by Florence years before I'd even known there was a war to fight. Valentina sat across from me, laptop open, legal pad covered in notes. 23 years old, top of her class at Emory Law, and thanks to Florence, the granddaughter I'd gotten back just in time to lose my son. Stanley picked up the hard drive. Walk me through it. I opened Exhibit A. Power of attorney. Roxanne had it drawn up, presented it to me September 25th. Comprehensive authority, real estate bank accounts, medical decisions, including involuntary commitment. But you didn't sign it, Stanley said. I signed Harold Hewitt. Person doesn't exist. Documents void ab initio. Stanley smiled. The kind of smile lawyers get when they see an opponent's fatal mistake. She never checked the signature. She never even looked at it. Just assumed I was too senile to know my own name. I moved to Exhibit B, bank rejection letter. Nadine's co-trustee block. The memorial fund locked behind 2 signatures Roxanne would never get. Exhibit C, Instagram screenshots. 180,000 followers watching her exploit my confusion for social media engagement, including the deleted comment about her 2019 scandal. Exhibit D, wedding ring documentation. Brent selling his mother's jewelry for $400. Exhibit E, invoice fraud. Original vendor quotes versus inflated fund reports. $9,600 in systematic theft. This isn't just evidence, Lawrence, Stanley said, spreading the folders across the table. This is a prosecutorial gift basket. Fraud, forgery, elder exploitation, charity theft. The DA could build 3 separate cases. I pulled out Florence's notebook, the brown leather worn soft from handling. Dr. Sudatum, Florence's notebook has a section called Trial Strategy, I said. She wrote this 18 months before she died. Every exhibit labeled, every legal angle mapped. Valentina reached for the notebook. I slid it across the table. She opened to the middle, started reading. Her eyes widened. She cited specific Georgia statutes. Valentina said, voice quiet with something like awe. OCGA Section 16-9-1 for forgery. Section 16-8-3 for theft by deception. Mr. Hewitt, your wife thought like a prosecutor. Valentina's voice cracked slightly on the word prosecutor. This 23-year-old paralegal just realized she was handling evidence compiled by a dead woman who'd outlawyered her own terminal diagnosis. There's more, Valentina said. She pulled a folder from her own bag, thicker than mine. Official letterhead from the Georgia Secretary of State. I ran a corporate background check on Roxanne Dalton, her maiden name. Found a dissolved 501c3 from 4 years ago. Peachtree Arts Initiative registered March 2019, dissolved November 2019. Stanley leaned forward. Let me guess, financial irregularities. 2 donor lawsuits alleging she pocketed donation-matching funds. Both settled with NDAs, but the state filings are public record. Valentina pulled out dissolution documents. $23,000 in unaccounted donations. The charity folded 8 months after launch. She's done this before. The Instagram comment. The one Roxanne had deleted in 43 seconds. Someone had known. Someone had tried to warn the world, and Florence had predicted it without ever seeing it. I flipped through Florence's notebook to section 19, read it aloud. Exhibit F prior bad acts. Check her maiden name. Check 2018 to 2020. She's done this before. Pattern evidence. Stanley set down his coffee cup, stared at the notebook. Florence knew, he asked. She predicted it, I said. Valentina just proved it. Valentina was quiet for a long moment. Then, Mr. Hewitt, I've been a paralegal for 8 months. Your wife was a better investigator than half the attorneys I've worked for. She was a 3rd-grade teacher when I said. She spent 30 years learning how to spot liars before they finished lying. Stanley stood, walked to the window, looked out over Midtown Atlanta glass towers, traffic people living normal lives where wives didn't die leaving forensic blueprints for destroying daughters-in-law. Prior bad acts are admissible in fraud cases, Stanley said. Establishes pattern motive absence of mistake. The 2019 charity theft makes the Memorial Fund theft look like a career, not an isolated incident. He turned back to the table, started arranging the folders in a line, a B, C, D, E, F, 6 exhibits. Like a royal flush, each one a card Florence had dealt from beyond the grave. Only one more card left to play. Florence predicted 7, I said. Section 22. Exhibit G. I opened the notebook to the final section. Fictional G. The final nail. I read. The page was mostly blank. Just one line in Florence's handwriting. She'll give this to you herself. You'll know it when you see it. Stanley looked at the calendar on his phone. November 1st. Gala's November 16th. 15 days. Whatever Exhibit G is, Valentina said, it's something Roxanne will do. Something so incriminating Florence didn't need to predict the details, just knew it would happen. The gala, I said. Florence wrote that the gala isn't just a memorial, it's a courtroom. Every guest is a witness. Stanley nodded slowly, understanding settling over his features. We let her throw the party, he said. We let her stand up in front of 200 people and media cameras. We let her make her speech about Florence's legacy while stealing from Florence's fund. And then we show everyone what she is, I finished. Stanley slid the 6 exhibit folders into his briefcase. A through F5 I'd collected, and one Valentina had unearthed, all matching Florence's predictions. One more, I said, tapping section 22 in the notebook. Exhibit G, the final nail. She'll give this to you herself. You'll know it when you see it. Stanley looked up, met my eyes. 15 days until the gala, he said. Whatever G is, it's coming soon. I watched my daughter-in-law open my medicine cabinet at 2:17 a.m. on November 3rd, and I knew before her hand even reached for the lisinopril bottle that Florence's Exhibit G had just delivered itself. The hidden camera I had installed behind the bathroom mirror, a wide-angle pinhole lens, the same model I had used throughout the house, captured everything in perfect clarity. Roxanne stood in my ensuite bathroom, wearing surgical gloves and carrying a small amber bottle. She opened my blood pressure medication, dumped the pills into her pocket, and replaced them with identical-looking capsules from her container. She closed the bottle carefully, placed it back exactly where it had been, and slipped out. I waited 20 minutes after her bedroom door clicked shut. Then I retrieved the compromised medication, photographed it from every angle with timestamp metadata, and sealed it in an evidence bag Eleanor Voss had provided. Eleanor was Stanley's investigator, 30 years in forensic documentation. The woman Florence had instructed Stanley to assign to my case 6 months before she died. The bottle Roxanne had used, hastily discarded in the guest bathroom trash, joined it. I replaced my lisinopril with vitamin C capsules I'd prepared days earlier. Same size, same color, same weight. Florence's voice echoed in my mind. Exhibit G, the final nail. She won't be able to help herself, darling. The gala is too close. She'll make her move. My wife had predicted this moment 8 months ago. At breakfast, I performed the role of my life. I shuffled into the kitchen at 7:30, gripping the counter for support. Didn't sleep well, I mumbled, pouring coffee with an exaggerated tremor. Feel a bit off this morning. Roxanne looked up from her phone, eyes bright with interest. You do look pale, Lawrence. Maybe you should rest today. No. I waved her off, taking my morning medication, the harmless vitamin C with orange juice. Just need my pills. Always feel better after my pills. She watched me swallow them with the focused intensity of a hawk watching prey. I ate half a piece of toast, claimed fatigue, and retreated to my study. Through the crack in the door, I watched her make a phone call, speaking too quietly for me to hear, but gesturing excitedly. Stanley texted at 9 a.m. Package received. Lab confirmed pure arsenic trioxide in gelatin capsules. Lethal dose within 72 hours. We have her. I called him immediately. We need to move carefully, Stanley said. Ada Morgan reviewed the evidence this morning. Roxanne hasn't administered a lethal dose. You swapped the medication before she could. What we have is attempted poisoning, but her defense will argue contamination, mistake anything her lawyer can manufacture. If we arrest now, we lose the financial fraud charges. Her attorney will negotiate down to a single count, and she walks in 3 years. But if we wait until the gala, she commits charity fraud publicly, in front of 200 witnesses and 3 camera crews. On the same night we present the poisoning evidence, the DA can file all 7 counts simultaneously. She'll have no leverage to negotiate. You're certain she can't try again before November 16th? I asked. Your medication is secured. I've arranged for daily check-ins. Ada Morgan has signed off on the delay. 11 days, Lawrence. Then we end it all at once. I agreed. Florence had planned for this too. The gala wasn't just a reveal. It was the moment when every crime converged into one inescapable prosecution. I sat in my leather chair, hands shaking for real now, and thought about Florence's final gift. My wife had mapped every move, anticipated every escalation, and given me the tools to survive it. Exhibit G was complete, but the day wasn't finished. Monica Reeves arrived at 2 p.m., the event planner Roxanne had hired for the gala. I'd scheduled this meeting deliberately, wanting to document the final budget before the reveal. Monica was professional, efficient 40-something, with a tablet and a no-nonsense demeanor. She spread vendor contracts across my dining table while Roxanne hovered nearby. Final numbers, Mr. Hewitt. Monica tapped her screen. The gala will cost $247,000, as agreed. I nodded slowly, playing my role. And the Florence Hewitt Memorial Scholarship Fund. How much did we allocate? Monica glanced at Roxanne, who smiled warmly. We discussed this, Lawrence. Remember, the scholarship will launch after the gala once we've raised additional funds from donors. Just so the current allocation is 0. Monica confirmed, reading from her spreadsheet. The gala budget covers venue rental at $68,000, catering at $92,000, entertainment at $43,000, decor at $31,000, and miscellaneous expenses at $13,000. The scholarship fund is listed as a future initiative. I let confusion cloud my face. But Florence wanted to help teachers. That was the whole point. Roxanne placed her hand on my shoulder, the same hand that had held arsenic capsules 14 hours earlier. And we will help them, Lawrence. This gala is the first step. You're just tired today. Why don't you rest? Monica looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. She gathered her contracts and left 30 minutes later with Roxanne's signature on every page. I recorded the entire meeting. That evening, I reviewed the 7 exhibits that would destroy my daughter-in-law. 7 exhibits. 6 I had gathered. 1 Florence had promised would deliver itself, and it had at 2:17 a.m. in surgical gloves on camera. A through G forgery, fraud, exploitation, theft, invoice inflation, prior bad acts, attempted murder. Florence had designed this sequence like a bridge, each exhibit supporting the next, the structure sound, the conclusion inevitable. Florence had designed this sequence like a bridge, each exhibit supporting the next, the structure sound, the conclusion inevitable. I sat in my study on November 5th, 11 days before the gala, and made my final preparation calls. I sat in my study on November 5th, 11 days before the gala, and made my final preparation calls. Stanley confirmed the district attorney would attend the event as a concerned observer. Valentina verified that warrant applications were ready pending my signal. James Kowalski had confirmed the backup HDMI port and screen access were in place. Everything was in place. But as I hung up the phone, Roxanne knocked on my study door. Lawrence, can I come in? I opened it to find her smiling, holding a small gift box wrapped in silver paper. I know you've been feeling unwell, she said softly. I wanted to give you something special, an early celebration before the gala, just the 2 of us. She placed the box on my desk. Inside was a bottle of 30-year-old Macallan Scotch, Florence's favorite, the one I'd shared with my wife on our 40th anniversary. I thought we could have a drink together, Roxanne continued. Toast to Florence's memory, toast to family. She pulled 2 crystal glasses from her pocket, already prepared, and I realized Exhibit G might not have been her final move after all. The hardest letter I ever wrote was the one I'd never send 3 pages to my son, explaining why I chose his mother's memory over his future. I declined Roxanne's toast that evening, claiming exhaustion. She left the scotch bottle on my desk, a reminder or a trap. I poured it down the sink at midnight and locked my study door. November 7th, 12:47 a.m. Fountain pen in hand. Blank linen paper before me. Dear Brent, I wrote and stopped. I wasn't writing to persuade him. I wasn't writing to warn him. I was writing to let him go. Your mother predicted this 2 years ago. I continued the nib, scratching against fiber. She knew Roxanne would push too far. She knew you'd choose silence. She knew I'd choose justice. The letter wasn't an explanation. It was a release. I wrote about the Golden Gate Bridge drawing. 6th grade. Brent had spent 3 hours with the drafting kit I'd bought him, mechanical pencil, moving with the careful precision of someone who understood that structure mattered. Florence had stood in the doorway watching. She'd looked at me and mouthed, "He's yours." I'd believed it then. I'd believed my son would grow up to build things, to understand that foundations couldn't be compromised, that integrity was load-bearing. I didn't know when I lost him, but I knew when I accepted it, when he nodded in that church pew and didn't look at his mother's casket. 3 pages, single-spaced, no corrections. The final paragraph. I'm not trying to save you anymore, son. I'm saying goodbye. When you see what I'm about to do, you'll have a choice: stand with your wife or grieve for your mother. I've already accepted which you'll choose. I hope you can live with it longer than I could. I folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, wrote Brent on the front. No last name needed. Only one person would ever open my desk drawer after I was gone. I locked it beside Florence's notebook and turned off the light. November 8th. Stanley and I arrived at the Ritz-Carlton Buckhead as concerned donors wanting to inspect the Memorial Fund's event arrangements. The grand ballroom smelled like fresh paint and floor polish. Roxanne had spared no expense. The 12-foot LED screen dominated the north wall. We want to ensure the presentation technology does justice to Florence's legacy, Stanley told the venue coordinator, his lawyer voice smooth and authoritative. May we speak with your AV technician? James Kowalski had the permanent squint of someone who'd spent 30 years staring at circuit diagrams and cable runs. We'd worked the Chattahoochee River Bridge project together in 2007, back when my biggest worry was load-bearing calculations instead of daughter-in-law homicide attempts. He looked up from a tangle of HDMI cables, blinked twice. Larry Jesus, haven't seen you since the Chattahoochee Bridge project. 2007, right. 2008, I corrected. You saved us 3 weeks when you redesigned the sensor array mounting. Florence Hewitt Memorial Gala. James read from his work order, then looked at me with sudden recognition. Florence Hewitt was your wife. I read the obituary. She designed the community center in Marietta. My daughter's robotics team meets there every Thursday. I pulled out my phone, showed him Florence's photo, the one from our 40th anniversary, where she wore the blue dress she'd chosen for the gala she'd never attend. James stopped talking about HDMI ports. I need a favor, I said quietly. Your client for this gala, my daughter-in-law, is stealing from my late wife's memorial scholarship fund. $247,000 spent on this event. $0 for teachers. I need 90 seconds of screen time she doesn't know about. The ballroom went silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. James looked at the photo again, then at the work order with Roxanne's signature. What do you need? I explained the backup HDMI port, the hidden remote access, the presentation that would play after Roxanne's opening speech. Your daughter, I added. Robotics team. Florence fought the city council for 2 years to get funding for that building. She wanted girls in STEM programs to have a space where they belonged. James nodded slowly. Lily, she's 12. Wants to be a mechanical engineer. Florence would have loved her. I'll give you the access port, James said, and I'll accidentally leave the master remote where you can find it. Make it count. We shook hands, not as old colleagues, but as fathers who understood what promises to good women required. Before I tell you what those 2 emojis meant, are you still with me right now? Comment A. If you think I should have warned her directly, or B, if the mind games were justified, and add 1 reason why in 5 to 10 words. A quick note. The next part includes some fictionalized details added to deepen the emotional impact. What matters is the lesson behind it. November 14th, 11:47 p.m., night before the gala. I opened the Burner app on my tablet, virtual WhatsApp number routed through 3 VPN servers untraceable. Typed Roxanne's cell number from memory. No words. Just 2 symbols, a film camera, and a courthouse. Nothing else, no explanation, no name. Every piece of evidence, every witness waiting, every crime documented. I hit send and opened the hidden camera feed from her bedroom. 11 seconds. That's how long it took her phone to light up on her nightstand. 34 seconds until she picked it up. Roxanne stared at the screen. Scrolled up no previous messages. Checked the sender unknown number. Her face went from confused to calculating to something that looked like fear. By 11:52 p.m. she'd Googled WhatsApp trace anonymous sender 4 times. By 11:58 p.m. she was searching, can emojis be used as evidence? By 12:14 a.m. she'd called someone Nathan, probably, and paced her bedroom for 17 minutes. The message wasn't a warning. It wasn't an invitation to confess or retreat. It was psychological warfare, designed to rob her of sleep the night before she needed to perform flawlessly in front of 200 witnesses. I wanted her paranoid, exhausted, off balance. I wanted her exactly where Florence had predicted she'd be, trapped in her own anxiety, unable to run, unable to ask for help, without revealing what she'd done. I closed the laptop at 12:47 a.m., Took my real lisinopril, the medication Roxanne hadn't poisoned, because I'd swapped it first. Opened Florence's notebook to the final page. My wife's handwriting dated March 15th, 2023, 2 months before she died. Sleep well tonight, my love. Tomorrow you keep your promise. Tomorrow she learns what it costs to erase me, F. I slept that night with Florence's notebook on the nightstand, and my phone alarm set for 6 a.m. In 11 hours, 200 people would gather to honor my wife's memory with $247,000 of stolen money. In 12 hours, they'd watch me destroy the woman who tried to erase her. In 13 hours, I'd lose my son forever. I slept anyway. The alarm went off at 6 a.m. on November 16th, and for the first time in 68 years, I knew exactly what I was going to wear to destroy someone's life. I silenced it and sat up. No grogginess, no hesitation. The 13-hour countdown had begun. I showered with methodical precision, shaved carefully, steady hands, clean lines. Opened my closet to the black wool suit I'd worn receiving the American Society of Civil Engineers Distinguished Service Award in 2015. Florence had stood in the front row that night, beaming. I buttoned the white shirt. Knotted the charcoal tie Windsor knot, the way Florence had taught me because a four-in-hand looks lazy, darling. From my dresser drawer, I retrieved her pearl ring and slid it into my breast pocket beside the sealed envelope marked Brent. I looked in the mirror. No hunched shoulders, no shuffle, no tremor, no vacant stare. I saw the engineer who'd built 7 bridges across 3 states. The man who'd calculated load-bearing stress on the Marietta bypass in 1998 when the city said it couldn't be done. "Good morning, Florence," I said to my reflection. "Let's finish what you started." She'd seen me shuffle in slippers for 2 months. Tonight, Roxanne would meet the man who'd designed fail-safe systems for structures that held thousands of lives. I touched the breast pocket where Florence's ring rested. "Her SCE gave me this suit for building bridges," I murmured. "I'm wearing it to burn one down." The hours blurred into mechanical preparation. Toast. Final file review. Confirmation with Eleanor that Detective Morrison and Assistant District Attorney Laura Morgan would arrive at 8:45 p.m. Text to James Screen Access confirmed. His reply, "Port B2 backup remote in tech booth utility drawer. You'll have full control." At 8 p.m. I drove to the Ritz-Carlton Buckhead and waited in the parking lot watching limousines deposit Atlanta's philanthropic elite. I entered at 8:30 p.m., 30 minutes late, deliberate. I wanted Roxanne settled and confident before I walked in. The grand ballroom blazed with crystal chandeliers and champagne towers. The 12-foot LED screen displayed Florence's photos teaching at the community center, accepting awards, smiling at our 40th anniversary. 200 guests, Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporters, WSB-TV camera crews, Instagram influencers filming their gowns against my dead wife's memory. Roxanne stood near the podium in a $12,000 emerald gown, Brent beside her in navy hand on her back. I walked in, black suit, straight posture, no cane. The coordinator didn't recognize me until I was 15 feet inside. Her eyes went wide. Roxanne saw me. Her face froze for a microsecond. Not confusion, not surprise. Primal fear, the kind that lives below conscious thought. The instinct that recognizes when prey realizes it's been hunting a predator. She recovered quickly, smile snapping into place, but I'd seen it. The dilated pupils, the involuntary step backward, the hand that started toward her throat before she forced it down. She crossed the room, heels clicking. "Lawrence, you look different. Are you feeling all right?" I met her eyes for the first time in 2 months. Held them. "I'm feeling clear-headed, actually." Florence would have loved this turnout. Her smile wavered. "You're standing so straight. And that suit, I haven't seen you wear that in years." 2015, I said calmly. The ASCE Distinguished Service Award ceremony. Florence's favorite. Roxanne's forced smile cracked for half a second. She saw me standing straight in the suit Florence had loved, and her hand moved involuntarily to her throat, checking for a noose that wasn't there yet. "Well, you look wonderful," she managed. "Please make yourself comfortable. We'll begin shortly." She turned away quickly, but I watched her pupils. The calculation behind her eyes. Why isn't he shuffling? Why isn't he confused? Why did the emoji warning come 12 hours before he walked in, looking like he planned something? I found Stanley and Valentina at a corner table near the back. Strategic sightline to the podium, the LED screen, and James's control booth. Valentina wore a gray blazer, and the platinum brooch Florence had bequeathed her, an Art Deco phoenix from the 1940s. "Mr. Hewitt," she stood. "You look ready?" Stanley checked his watch. "She's been looking at you every 90 seconds since you walked in. You rattled her." I sat and surveyed the room with an engineer's eye. The ballroom glittered like a jewelry box, but I saw it as Florence had designed it, a courtroom. The chandeliers were gallery lights. The champagne tower was the witness stand. The LED screen was the prosecution's exhibit table. Every Instagram influencer filming was a court reporter documenting evidence for public record. 200 witnesses, 3 camera crews, 2.3 million combined social media reach. Florence had calculated the audience down to the decimal. Valentina adjusted the platinum brooch, fingers trembling. "Mrs. Hewitt left me this in her will," she said quietly. "She wrote a note with it. Wear it when you see justice done." I didn't understand until Eleanor explained the plan 3 days ago. I looked at the phoenix rising from flames. "Florence didn't just plan the evidence," I said. "She orchestrated every witness's role. Your brooch, James's AV access, Stanley's legal authority, Eleanor's warrant coordination. Even the Instagram influencers, she knew Roxanne would invite them to broadcast her generosity." Valentina touched the brooch. "She turned the gala into a trial. She turned it into a reckoning." James caught my eye from the control booth. Nodded once. The backup HDMI port was live. My phone read 8:47 p.m. Stanley leaned close. 27 minutes. I watched Roxanne move through the crowd, greeting donors posing for photos, laughing. She glanced at me again, calculation sharpening to panic she couldn't name. She stepped to the microphone. The ballroom quieted. Champagne glasses paused. Camera lights flared red. Roxanne adjusted the emerald gown that cost $12,000 of Florence's memorial fund, smiled at the cameras that would broadcast her destruction to 2.3 million people, and began. "Good evening. We're gathered tonight to honor an extraordinary woman." Stanley's phone timer read 27 minutes, 14 seconds. Roxanne was 17 words into her tribute to Florence's legacy when the 12-foot LED screen behind her went dark for 3 seconds, then lit up with my wife's grave and my daughter-in-law's voice saying, "Finally, it's our turn." She'd been praising Florence's dedication to education, her voice honeyed and practiced. "My beloved mother-in-law believed every teacher deserved support, and tonight we honor that vision by..." The screen went black. Roxanne stopped mid-word, turned. The ballroom fell silent. 3 seconds. I'd timed it with James long enough to capture attention, short enough to prevent technical interruption. At 9:15 p.m. exactly, I signaled James. The screen blazed to life. Florence's headstone filled the frame. September 20th, 2023. Hidden camera footage, crystal clear audio. Roxanne's voice. "Finally, it's our turn. Old man won't last 6 months. Then it's $7.2 million, and Brent can actually retire." The ballroom gasped like a single organism. The cemetery clip ran 15 seconds. Then the montage began. 4 minutes. Florence had condensed 2 months of evidence into 4 minutes sequenced chronologically to show not isolated incidents, but escalating premeditation. September 21st. The moving truck crushing Florence's rose garden. Time-stamped. Deliberate. September 23rd. Florence's belongings in the Rosewood Estate dumpster photo albums teaching awards the quilt she'd sewn for Brent's first birthday. October 12th. Roxanne on speakerphone with Monica Reeves, the event planner. No actual scholarships. The awareness is the donation. People feel good, we keep the budget. October 19th. Zoom meeting with Nathan Cross. Invoice fraud discussed in clinical detail. We bill Lawrence's estate $340,000. Your company does $190,000 of work. We split the difference. October 26th. The insurance policy forgery. Documents side by side, original beneficiary designation versus the altered version making Roxanne sole recipient. November 3rd. 2:17 a.m. bathroom footage. Roxanne in surgical gloves opening my medicine cabinet, dumping blood pressure pills into her pocket, replacing them with arsenic capsules from an amber bottle. The timestamp burned in the corner. 2:17:33 a.m. Roxanne's face went white. She saw the timestamp and understood not just that I'd caught her, but that I'd been watching through hidden cameras for months. Every moment, every crime. Documented. The montage continued. November 5th. Brent at Chapman & Sons Pawn selling Florence's wedding ring. The clerk's voice, 14-karat gold half-carat diamond inscribed L plus F 1980. I can do $380. Brent's voice, take it. Every exhibit. Chronological. Each crime building on the last showing calculated escalation from graveside greed to attempted murder. Florence hadn't just gathered evidence. She'd constructed a prosecution narrative. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution photographer was shooting rapid fire. WSB TV cameras recording live. The Instagram live stream counter in the corner of my phone read 180,000 viewers. At 9:19 p.m., the screen went black. 5 seconds of absolute silence. Then the murmuring started, like a dam breaking whispers, becoming gasps, becoming voices. Did we just watch her try to poison him? On camera, she did that on camera. The scholarship fund was fake. The entire thing. Chairs scraped, champagne glasses hit tables. Dr. Eleanor Shaw sat on 3 non-profit boards and had the kind of reputation where walking out of a gala mid-event would make the morning news, which was exactly why her exit mattered. She stood, smoothed her gown, said nothing, walked out. 2 board members followed immediately, then a 4th, a 5th. The Instagram influencers, the ones Roxanne had paid to broadcast her generosity, stood frozen phones still recording. Then they started typing. Not deleting, posting. I watched the shift in real time. The publicity machine Roxanne had purchased for $18,000 was now broadcasting her fraud to millions. The amplification she'd bought to build her charity image was exposing every lie to an audience she'd assembled herself. Roxanne stood at the podium like a bridge after the load-bearing cables snap still upright for one impossible moment. Physics not yet catching up to structural failure, the collapse inevitable but not yet begun. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporter had covered society events for 15 years, but Marcus Delgado's expression, shifting from boredom to predatory focus, meant this story just became front page instead of style section. He moved toward the podium, recorder extended. Mrs. Hewitt, can you comment on the footage showing... Roxanne couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, no sound. The emerald gown glittered under the spotlights, like she was under interrogation. The ballroom had become exactly what Florence designed, a courtroom where the defendant stood exposed before 200 witnesses and 3 million potential jurors watching via livestream. Brent stood stage left 10 feet from his wife, staring at me. Not at Roxanne, at me. Our eyes met for the first time since Florence's funeral. He wasn't looking at his father. He was looking at the man who'd just destroyed his marriage in front of 200 people, exposed his wife's crimes to the world, and proved he'd sold his mother's wedding ring for $380. Trying to decide if I was family or enemy. Trying to understand how I could be both. Florence knew I couldn't be both. She'd known when she wrote the blueprint that choosing justice meant losing Brent forever. She'd accepted it. She'd asked me to accept it. I held his gaze and didn't look away. His face held the exact expression I'd seen 40 years ago when he was 6, and I told him his goldfish dyed confusion, betrayal, the dawning understanding that someone he trusted had let something irreplaceable die. Except this time, I was the one who'd killed it. Stanley's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, showed it to me. Text from Valentina, GBI en route, ETA 4 minutes. Stanley Lockwood didn't ask permission to take the microphone. He simply walked to the podium at 9:25 p.m., moved Roxanne aside with one hand, and said 5 words that turned evidence into legal execution. I was Florence's personal attorney. The ballroom was still reeling from the video evidence. Guests halfway to the exits froze. The GBI was 3 minutes out. Stanley had the floor. He spoke with the clinical precision of a man who'd spent 40 years dismantling defenses. Saltium. The power of attorney submitted to First National Bank on October 21st bears a signature that forensic analysis confirms was not executed by Lawrence Hewitt. It is void ab initio void from inception. Submission of a fraudulent power of attorney constitutes felony forgery under Georgia law. Roxanne stood 5 feet from him, still in the emerald gown, unable to move. Stanley continued. The Florence Hewitt Memorial Education Fund has been frozen pending Georgia Attorney General investigation. Misappropriation of charitable assets is prosecutable under OCGA Section 16-8-3. Criminal complaints have been filed with the Fulton County District Attorney regarding financial exploitation of an elder, attempted poisoning, and charity fraud. The room went silent. Not shocked silence. Legal threat silence. Stanley's voice dropped, but somehow carried farther. If you filmed tonight's event, preserve that footage. The district attorney may subpoena it as evidence. This is now a criminal matter. 200 phones stopped moving. The Instagram influencers who'd been typing expose captions suddenly understood they weren't just witnesses, they were evidence. Their live streams, their stories, their commentary were documentation that would be entered into court proceedings. Roxanne had assembled her own prosecution witnesses and paid them to film their testimony. Stanley opened a leather portfolio. Florence Hewitt's last will and testament contains a provision I am now obligated to read publicly, as it directly affects assets discussed tonight. He read from the document, voice steady. Section 7, Forfeiture Clause. Any beneficiary who uses my name, image, or memorial funds for personal financial gain forfeits all inheritance rights immediately and irrevocably. All forfeited assets shall transfer to the contingent beneficiary Emma Valentina Graves, age 23, paralegal, Lockwood and Associates. Valentina sat beside me, hands folded. She didn't react. Stanley continued. Inquisition. Tonight's memorial gala was funded by $247,000 of diverted charitable donations, documented by video evidence just presented to this assembly. The exploitation of Florence Hewitt's name and image for personal gain constitutes clear violation of Section 7's Forfeiture Clause. He looked up from the document. Miss Graves, please approach the podium. Valentina stood. Walked forward wearing Florence's platinum phoenix brooch, the one my wife had bequeathed with the note. Wear it when you see justice done. The room understood before I fully processed it. The 23-year-old paralegal I'd hired 2 months ago to help gather evidence wasn't my employee. She was Florence's chosen heir, Florence had hired her 18 months before she died, not as my investigator, as her successor. She'd interviewed candidates, vetted backgrounds, chosen someone who'd actually honor her commitment to education instead of exploit it. I'd been collecting evidence for a legal case. Florence had been building a legacy for someone who deserved it. My wife didn't just predict Brent would betray her memory. She auditioned, tested, and legally designated a stranger as her true heir while our son was still alive. The forfeiture clause wasn't punishment. It was insurance that her life's work would matter after she was gone. Valentina reached the podium. Stanley handed her a sealed envelope. Mrs. Hewitt left instructions to be opened only upon clause activation, he said quietly. They're yours now. She took the envelope with steady hands. Roxanne finally moved. Not toward the exit. Toward me. She crossed the ballroom floor, heels clicking, and stopped at my table. You had this planned the whole time, she said, voice shaking. The cameras, the evidence, the will, all of it. I stood. I had nothing planned, I said calmly. Florence had this planned 18 months before she died. I just kept the promise I made at her grave. I'll contest the forfeiture clause. Any attorney will tell you. Stanley has 40 years of litigation experience, I interrupted. And you're on camera committing 4 felonies. I'd save your money for criminal defense. GBI, Special Agent Thornton had the specific kind of calm that comes from 20 years of white-collar crime investigations. Polite, thorough, and completely immune to wealth or tears. He approached from the ballroom entrance shield visible on his belt. Mrs. Hewitt, I need you to step aside for questioning. Roxanne's face went white. She looked at Brent, still standing stage left where I'd last seen him. He didn't move toward her. I walked out at 9:50 p.m. The lobby was emptying, guests fleeing to avoid subpoenas, influencers still filming, reporters chasing quotes. Brent found me near the valet stand. Dad! I turned. He looked 10 years older than he had at Florence's funeral. His face was hollowed out, eyes red. Well, Dad, I'm sorry. I don't know when I stopped being your son. I know exactly when, I said. September 20th. That church pew. When you nodded at Roxanne's plan and didn't look at your mother's casket. You chose. I didn't know. Oh, you knew enough. You sold her wedding ring for $380. You stood beside the woman who tried to poison me. You chose. His hand moved toward me, reaching for a hug. Forgiveness, reconciliation. I extended my hand for a handshake. The half-second, when our gestures didn't match, was the moment we both understood. This wasn't forgiveness. This was a funeral for a relationship that died 2 months ago. We shook hands. His grip was weak. Mine was steady. Goodbye, Brent. I turned and walked toward my car. He didn't follow. I walked out of the Ritz-Carlton lobby at 9:56 p.m. and didn't look back. Behind me, my son standing alone, his hand still extended from a handshake that felt like signing divorce papers. Ahead, my car, my empty house, and Florence's notebook, with one final page I hadn't read, section 24, after it's done. I had no idea what came after destroying your family to honor your wife's memory. But Florence did. The house was empty when I walked in at 1:17 a.m., truly empty for the first time in 2 months, and the silence hit harder than any of Roxanne's crimes. I'd driven home on autopilot, section 24, burning in my mind like unfinished business. The front door unlocked with my key. No resistance. No one inside waiting to ambush me with false concern or stolen authority. Just silence. I walked through the foyer. Her perfume still lingered, Chanel No. 5 in the foyer, the guest bathroom, the hallway. Like a ghost haunting rooms that weren't hers. The kitchen had Roxanne's meal prep containers stacked by the sink. The master bedroom closet was half empty where Florence's clothes had hung. The living room smelled faintly of the vanilla candles Roxanne burned every evening. 2 months of invasion, every room marked. I sat in Florence's reading chair by the window, the one she'd occupied every morning with coffee and crossword puzzles. The leather still held the shape of her, and I cried. 10 minutes. Maybe 15. The kind of crying I hadn't allowed myself since the funeral, uncontrolled, gasping the grief I'd postponed to execute her blueprint. When it stopped, I felt hollow. I made coffee with Florence's machine, the one she'd insisted on buying because good coffee is non-negotiable, darling. Opened her notebook to section 24, the title After It's Done. Her handwriting steady and precise. You'll feel hollow. That's not emptiness, my love. That's space for rebuilding. Cry first, you've earned it. Then change the locks. Then call Nadine. She'll understand what this cost you. Tell her the fund is safe. Tell her I said hello. Florence had scripted my grief process. She'd known I'd need permission to break down after keeping her promise. Known I'd feel guilty for crying when justice was served. Known I'd need instructions for what came after destroying my family to honor her memory. I picked up my phone at 2:30 a.m. Nadine answered on the second ring. Lawrence, are you all right? It's over, I said. Florence's fund is safe. The money goes to teachers like she wanted. I saw the news, she said quietly. Every channel. Lawrence, what you did. See, what Florence did, I corrected. I just kept the promise. She would be so proud of you. I smiled despite everything. She would say, I told you so. Nadine laughed. So did I. The first real laugh in 2 months. We talked for 20 minutes. About Florence. About the scholarship. About what happens when you love someone enough to become their justice. I slept 3 hours in Florence's reading chair and woke at 9 a.m. with a plan. Derek Fisher arrived at 9:30 a.m. with his locksmith van. He'd changed enough locks in Rosewood Estates to know the difference between a break-in and a family implosion. He didn't ask follow-up questions. Changing all 5 locks, he said, reading my list. You get robbed. Worse, I said. Family moved in uninvited. He nodded like that explained everything and got to work. Front door, back door, garage, study, master bedroom, every entry point secured. Every key Roxanne had ever touched rendered useless. While Derek worked, I boxed Brent and Roxanne's belongings. Clothes, toiletries, Roxanne's Instagram ring light. Brent's golf clubs, the ones I'd bought him for his 35th birthday. The drafting kit, I found it at the bottom of his closet, still in the wooden case. The same kit I'd bought when he was 11. The one he'd used to draw the Golden Gate Bridge for 3 hours, while Florence stood in the doorway, smiling, mouthing, "He's yours." I sat on the garage floor for 5 minutes, holding that kit before I could seal the box. I was packing my son's entire life into boxes for goodwill. The golf clubs, the drafting kit, the photo of him and Florence at his college graduation, both of them laughing, her arm around his shoulders. Every piece of Brent I'd kept in this house, 40 years of fatherhood, going into boxes labeled for donation pickup at 5 p.m. I kept nothing. By 2 p.m., the house was clear. I opened every window. Burned the sage Florence had kept for clearing energy after bad guests. The smoke drifted through empty rooms. At 2:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. Mrs. Calloway stood on the porch, holding a casserole and a framed photograph. I saw the news, she said simply. Figured you hadn't eaten. And I have something that belongs to you. She handed me the frame, Florence, holding the Georgia Educator of the Year Award crystal plaque. Laughing. Wearing the blue dress she'd chosen for the gala she'd never attend. I saw your son throw this in the trash 2 Tuesdays ago, Mrs. Calloway explained. Couldn't let it go to the dump. Not Miss Florence's biggest achievement. My voice came out thick. This was 2018. Georgia Educator of the Year. She gave a speech about education being the only inheritance that can't be stolen. I stopped, looked at the plaque in Florence's hands. Read the engraved text. For demonstrating that education is the only inheritance that cannot be stolen. She'd given that speech in 2018, 5 years before her death. The foundational thesis for her entire revenge blueprint, delivered to 500 educators, while I sat in the audience proud, not understanding. I was watching her plant the seeds of a 2-year operation. Florence hadn't improvised this plan when she got sick. She'd been building the philosophy for half a decade. She was already planning for this. I said aloud. Mrs. Calloway touched my arm. That woman knew what mattered, Lawrence, and she knew you'd finish it. I carried the photo to the foyer, found the nail hole where it had hung for 5 years still there beneath the beach sunset print Roxanne had installed to erase Florence's presence. The frame slid back into the original hole like a bone returning to its socket. 2 months of Roxanne's decor hadn't filled the space, just covered it. Now Florence's laughing face reclaimed the wall she'd occupied since 2018. At 5 p.m., I stood in the foyer looking at that photograph. Florence holding the award, radiant, the same woman who'd planned a 2-year revenge operation from her deathbed. I pulled out section 24 and read the final paragraph I'd skipped. Now write it down. Every detail. Someone needs to know what happens when you love someone enough to become their justice. I left you a journal in the desk. Start whenever you're ready. I love you. F. I opened the study desk drawer. Blank leather journal. Fountain pen. The title page already written in Florence's careful handwriting. The last blueprint, a love story. Stanley's voice on the phone marked the final chapter of Florence's blueprint. Fulton County DA filed all charges this morning. Roxanne faces 60 years maximum. 11 days had passed since the gala, a period I spent reading Florence's instructions and waiting for this precise moment. November 28, 3:47 p.m. Stanley was clinical, detailing the 3 felony counts: charitable fund misappropriation, elder financial exploitation, and attempted poisoning. If convicted, Roxanne faced 6 decades, and Brent stood to lose 20 years as an accomplice. I sat at Florence's desk, her photograph visible through the doorway. They'll likely plead down, Stanley noted. But the evidence, 200 witnesses, video documentation, and forensic analysis of the arsenic capsules, is the most ironclad case the DA has handled in 15 years. Regarding the fund, the news was absolute. $250,000 preserved. The power of attorney was voided ab initio. Every transaction Roxanne attempted is legally erased, as if she never had authority. Florence's will stood untouched, and the memorial fund was finally ready to serve its purpose for Georgia public school teachers. Valentina would administer the scholarship as the primary beneficiary. I hung up, walked to the foyer, and looked at Florence's laughing photograph. Good Florence. Perfect. Thanksgiving weekend brought the first warmth back into the house. Mrs. Calloway had rescued Florence's handwritten peach cobbler recipe from Brent's discarded pile. I followed it, exactly the scent of cinnamon and brown sugar filling the kitchen, recalling every holiday Florence had crafted. Nadine arrived with wine and memories of their college days, followed by Valentina with sunflowers. We sat at the table that had been silent for 2 months, and for the first time laughter echoed through the rooms. When Valentina laughed, the pitch and rhythm were identical to Florence's, a haunting, beautiful reminder of the woman who had orchestrated this entire transition. On December 9th, Valentina and I replanted the southern rose garden, replacing the bushes Brent's moving truck had crushed. I handed her the diagram Florence had drawn in 2003, complete with solar angle calculations. We dug 12 holes in companionable silence, burying saplings in the frozen December earth like promises. Planting in winter was an act of faith that spring would return, that warmth would coax the roots into bloom, and that I would be there to see it. It was the first time since the funeral I had made plans for my own future, instead of merely executing hers. "You're planning to stay," Valentina whispered, watching me. "I am," I replied. We finished at 11:47 a.m., standing over 12 bare saplings, spaced with surgical precision. Inside on my desk, the blank journal waited, the last blueprint, a love story. Ready for me to explain how love, when engineered correctly, survives anything. I had built 7 bridges during my career as an engineer. Now it was time to build one final connection, the bridge between what happened and what it truly meant. The blueprint was complete, the roses were planted, and for the first time in years, I was ready for spring. So task 7.1. The conference room at Lockwood and Associates held 4 chairs, but only 2 were occupied by those Florence had chosen to replace the family who had betrayed her. I arrived the day after planting roses, eager to understand the complete architecture of the plan Florence had meticulously constructed. Stanley sat at the head of the table. Valentina and Nadine sat beside me. 2 empty chairs remained across from us, representing my son and his wife, absent by Florence's design. Stanley began at exactly 2 p.m. For the record, Brent and Roxanne Hewitt forfeited all beneficiary rights on November 16, 2023, pursuant to Section 7 of this will. The weight of those empty chairs was suffocating, yet Florence had ensured this outcome long before they committed their final crimes. Stanley read the preamble of the will executed 6 months before Florence's passing. "I execute this will to protect what I built from those who would erase it." If you are reading this, Lawrence kept his promise. If Emma Valentina Graves is present, justice was served. If my son is absent, he made his choice. She had known everything 18 months in advance. She had drafted her will expecting their betrayal, planning for their absence, and choosing her true successors before the offenses were even committed. Stanley proceeded through the articles. The Rosewood estate was placed in a life estate for me with full ownership, transferring to Valentina only after my death. The $7 million investment portfolio and engineering patents were moved into an irrevocable trust, ensuring I received the income for my lifetime, while the principal remained protected. Finally, the memorial fund intended for teachers pursuing advanced degrees remained under Nadine's watchful co-trusteeship. As Stanley set the documents down, he looked at me. "Florence met with me for 18 months, revising this 4 times. Even if Brent contests this, he would be challenging an independent trust he cannot touch. The house, the money, and the fund are all legally unbreakable." She thought of everything. Nadine spoke softly, the realization finally settling over us. The memorial fund was never truly about the gala. It was bait. Florence created $250,000 of temptation, knowing Roxanne couldn't resist stealing it. The fund wasn't the tribute, it was the trap. The theft provided the public indefensible proof that triggered the forfeiture. I finally understood. Florence hadn't planned mere revenge. She had engineered total protection. She destroyed those who sought to erase her not for punishment, but to secure my safety and her educational legacy. As I left the office, the revelation was clear. Her blueprint wasn't about destruction at all. It was an act of profound preservation, and the journal waiting on my desk was meant to explain what love looks like when it must become architecture. I carefully opened the old 1992 drafting kit I originally bought for Brent when he was only 11. Back then, he spent 3 long hours drawing the Golden Gate Bridge while Florence watched intently from the doorway, smiling beautifully. 31 years later, I was not drawing architectural plans. I was using a fountain pen to write a narrative blueprint. I sat at my old drafting table on December 20th, opening Florence's journal to her handwritten title page, "The Last Blueprint, a Love Story." I wrote the heartfelt dedication first, for Valentina, so she knows she truly comes from Florence's incredible foresight, from choosing justice over silence. Then I detailed everything chronologically, from the tragic September 20th funeral and the hidden notebook discovery to the grand gala reckoning and the final will reading. It was the first-person account Florence had instructed me to create a testimonial architecture, proving how a dying woman engineered justice from beyond the grave. By December 28th, I finished 87 handwritten pages. I penned the final paragraph. I am not a writer. I am an engineer. But Florence once told me the best structures tell a story just by standing. I hope this one does. I placed it on the shelf next to Florence's predictive notebook. Together, they proved that love, when engineered correctly, can survive forces designed to collapse it. On December 29th, Valentina found me staring at the 2 volumes. "Did you finish?" she asked. I nodded, explaining it captured what love looks like when it becomes architecture. Touching the spines, she whispered, "Someday I'll read this to understand the why." On New Year's Eve, Valentina and I sat on the front porch in our rocking chairs. The cool Atlanta night illuminated the 12 bare rose saplings we had replanted. Tiny green buds were already showing on the winter stems. She held hot chocolate. I held Florence's favorite Earl Grey tea. We rocked in comfortable silence. Valentina spoke softly. Roxanne called this house her holiday in the deposition transcript. I felt the final piece of Florence's design click. She was right, I replied. It was a holiday, just not hers. Florence took an 18-month holiday from death to execute justice. Roxanne thought she was on vacation from accountability, but she was actually a defendant at a trial that hadn't officially started yet. Valentina smiled. Florence planned a holiday that lasted longer than her life. We sat until 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the new year. The roses stood deep in the December ground, waiting for April warmth. Florence had calculated their southern exposure perfectly, in 2003 predicted their destruction, and ensured I would survive to replant them. Some things, if planted right, survive everything. The year closed on survival, not erasure. I had lost my son, but I gained a granddaughter. I honored my wife by becoming evidence instead of a victim, building one final architectural bridge between what happened and what it truly meant. The last blueprint now stood complete. And to you listening to my story, remember this. I spent 40 years building bridges. 7 of them still stand across 3 states. But I never thought I'd have to build the hardest one, the bridge between honoring my wife's memory and losing my son forever. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the warning signs earlier. Don't make my mistake of assuming family loyalty is guaranteed. Trust, but verify. Always. What I learned through this journey is that family justice isn't about revenge. It's about protecting what matters. Florence taught me that love sometimes means becoming evidence instead of staying silent. When someone tries to erase the legacy you built together, you have a choice: let them win or stand up with truth. I believe God put me through this for a reason, to show that even at 68, even in grief, seeking family justice is still possible. Dad's revenge stories like mine aren't about hate. They're proof that choosing truth over silence matters, no matter your age. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Please share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Wise Revenge for more Dad's revenge stories about standing up when it matters most. Your story might be next. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything to me. One final reminder: while this story contains fictionalized elements for narrative and reflection, the lesson about choosing truth and seeking family justice when your legacy is threatened, that part is real.